Lennox Grant adjusted his shirt as he stepped into the dimly lit bar at the marina. 50 years of life had left his face worn, but still handsome in a distinguished way. The divorce had drained much of his spirit, yet his eyes carried a flicker of hope as he ordered a drink. He had not planned to stay long, just a glass of whiskey before returning to his quiet apartment. But then his gaze caught a woman across the room. Selina Mbeki sat at the bar with an easy confidence, her smile bright and her presence magnetic. Her figure was wrapped in a deep red dress that hugged her curves, and her laughter cut through the murmur of conversation. When her eyes met Lennox's, she didn't look away. Instead, she lifted her glass in a subtle toast, and for the first time in years, he felt noticed. He walked over, nervous but determined, and introduced himself. Selina's voice was smooth and playful, carrying hints of a woman used to attention but not undeserving of it. They spoke easily, the age difference almost evaporating under the weight of shared jokes and her insistence that he looked far younger than his years. She teased him about his taste in music. He admitted he still preferred old soul records to anything modern, and she laughed in a way that made him feel like it was the right answer. Hours passed like minutes. When Selina leaned closer and mentioned a yacht party happening that weekend, Lennox's pulse quickened. She told him it was hosted by her friend Damian Cole, a wealthy entrepreneur with a reputation for lavish gatherings. At first, Lennox hesitated. A yacht full of strangers half his age sounded like a recipe for embarrassment, but Selina touched his arm lightly, her fingers warm and reassuring. "Come with me," she whispered. "You'll have fun. I promise." Against his better judgment, Lennox agreed. On Saturday evening, the marina was alive with music and lights as Lennox arrived. Damien's yacht loomed against the dock, sleek and modern, the name Sea Spirit painted across its stern. Selina was already waiting, radiant in a flowing white dress, her smile widening when she saw him. She took his hand and guided him aboard where laughter, glasses clinking, and the thump of music blended into an atmosphere of reckless joy. Damian Cole, tall and sharply dressed, greeted Lennox politely, though his eyes lingered curiously on Selina. Introductions followed. Nia Roberts with her bold earrings and infectious laugh, Jamal Price, who dominated conversations with his booming voice, Ayanna Brooks with quiet elegance, and Tyrone Ellis, who already looked 3 drinks deep. Lennox felt out of place at first, but Selina remained by his side, her warmth shielding him from the subtle stares of the younger crowd. He forced himself to laugh at Jamal's jokes, nodded at Ayanna's polite small talk, and tried to keep pace with Tyrone's slurred storytelling. Slowly, he began to feel less like an outsider. As the yacht pulled away from the dock, champagne was poured and music rose louder. Lennox found himself loosening, laughing more than he had in years. Selina pressed close as they stood at the railing, the city lights flickering across the waves. She whispered stories about her travels, about how she hated men her age who were immature, how she admired Lennox's composure. The flattery worked. He felt like a man reborn, younger and desired. When she leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, he realized how much he had missed human closeness. Later, Damien announced fireworks, and everyone gathered on the deck. The crowd cheered as colors exploded across the sky. While eyes turned upward, Selina leaned into Lennox's ear. "Let's find somewhere quieter," she murmured. Her hand slid into his, guiding him below deck toward the cabins. Lennox's heart pounded as they entered a small but elegant room. The thrum of music and laughter dimmed behind the closed door. Selina sat on the bed, crossing her legs, and opened a sleek black bag she had stashed earlier. Inside, Lennox glimpsed polished metal objects that looked unfamiliar yet deliberate. His brow furrowed, curiosity mixing with unease. Selina smiled reassuringly. "These are special. They make things more intense. Don't be nervous. I'll take care of you." He hesitated, uncertainty creeping into his chest, but her eyes held his, her touch coaxing. She stroked his cheek with the back of her hand and whispered his name like a promise. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe this night could make him feel alive again. As the yacht rocked gently against the waves, Selina prepared the devices, her expression calm, almost professional. She explained in vague words, hinting that they were safe, that she had tried them before, that they were designed to heighten every sensation without danger. Lennox laughed nervously, asking if he should be worried, but Selena only leaned forward and kissed him softly, silencing his doubts with warmth and confidence. Her scent, her voice, her closeness, all of it pulled him deeper under her spell until his hesitation gave way to a reckless willingness. He thought of his loneliness, of the years of emptiness since his marriage ended, and told himself that maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of risk a man needed to take to feel truly alive. Selena dimmed the cabin lights until only a soft glow remained. The yacht swayed gently, muffling the laughter and music above deck, as if the world outside no longer mattered. Lennox sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, his heart racing. Selena leaned closer, her voice hushed and deliberate, telling him to trust her, to let go of his fear. She drew one of the devices from the sleek bag, its polished surface gleaming under the light. Lennox frowned, unfamiliar with the object, but Selena placed it in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, cold at first touch, but smooth. He turned it awkwardly before handing it back to her. "What exactly does it do?" he asked. Selena smiled patiently. "It makes you feel more. It takes ordinary pleasure and turns it into something unforgettable. Don't think of it as strange. Think of it as an adventure." Her eyes never left his as she explained, her tone both soothing and commanding, a mixture that left him torn between nerves and intrigue. She produced a small bottle of clear gel, coating the device with practiced movements. Lennox tried to steady his breathing, telling himself she seemed experienced, that if she trusted this, maybe he could too. She placed a hand on his chest, gently pressing him back onto the bed. Her touch was tender, her confidence absolute, and slowly he surrendered to her rhythm. As she guided the first device into place, he flinched at the coldness but said nothing. She whispered reassurance, kissed his temple, and continued. For a while, the sensations were unusual but not unbearable. He shifted, uncertain but fascinated by the intensity. Selena adjusted the regulator, showing him how the mechanism expanded gradually. At first, the pressure was strange, uncomfortable yet oddly exhilarating. "You see?" she whispered. "It's safe. You control it." He nodded, swallowing hard, feeling his body respond despite his unease. Minutes passed. Lennox let himself believe her promises, convincing himself that the oddity of the moment was simply part of something new. Selena's voice soothed him, telling him how well he was doing, how brave he was for trying something different. He smiled weakly, embarrassed by the praise but comforted by her closeness. Then she reached for a second device. His eyes widened. "Two," he muttered, his voice cracking. Selena laughed lightly and kissed him again. "Only if you want to. You'll see. Together, they make the experience complete." Against the thrum of his pulse, he agreed, still too entranced by her confidence to refuse. The second device felt stranger, and for a moment he wondered if he had made a mistake. But Selena's calm never wavered. She adjusted it gently, carefully, watching his face for reaction. When both devices were in place, Lennox breathed heavily, his body stretched by sensations unlike anything he had known. He whispered her name, half with gratitude, half with apprehension. She stroked his cheek, her voice low. "You're strong. You're perfect. Just relax." She reached for the regulator again, turning it slowly. The expansion was gradual, measured, almost delicate. Lennox's body tensed, then adjusted. His breath caught, but he nodded for her to continue. His trust deepened with each careful adjustment. The sensations grew more intense, riding the edge of pain and pleasure, but Selena reminded him he was in control. "Tell me if it's too much," she said, her lips grazing his ear. The yacht rocked gently, the cabin warm with rising tension. Above them, the party continued, laughter echoing faintly, music vibrating through the walls. But in that room, time felt suspended. Lennox thought of his ex-wife, of the years wasted in solitude, of nights staring at empty walls. Now here he was, with a beautiful woman who wanted him, who made him feel desired, alive, daring. He closed his eyes and let the unfamiliar sensations consume him. What he didn't know was how fragile the line between safety and disaster truly was, and how quickly this night of reckless intimacy would turn into a nightmare no one aboard the yacht could ever forget. Selena turned the regulator again, her movements steady, her eyes fixed on Lennox's face. At first, the device responded smoothly, the expansion gradual, the sensation intense but manageable. Lennox gripped the sheets, his breath shallow, sweat beginning to bead along his forehead. He nodded faintly, urging her to continue, though doubt lingered behind his eyes. Selena whispered encouragement, kissing his cheek, her confidence like a steady hand on his fear. Then, without warning, there was a sharp click inside the mechanism. Lennox gasped, his body jerking as the device expanded abruptly. Pain shot through him, ripping his breath into a strangled cry. Selena froze, her hand still on the regulator. "What happened?" he choked, clutching his stomach. She tried to reverse the turn, but the mechanism resisted, stuck in place. A look of alarm flickered across her face, quickly masked by forced calm. "Stay still, it's fine," she said, but her voice quivered. The device expanded further, jagged and unrelenting. Lennox's eyes widened in horror as pain spread through his abdomen, sharp and tearing. He tried to move, but every shift worsened the agony. "Stop it! Take it out!" he cried, his voice cracking. Selena's hands trembled as she struggled with the regulator, twisting, pulling, her calm slipping into panic. Then came another metallic snap. The second device jerked inside his body, stretching beyond tolerance. Lennox screamed, the sound muffled by the cabin walls, drowned by the music above deck. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as his abdomen tightened, pain radiating through every nerve. He thrashed weakly, clutching Selena's arm, pleading through gasps. She yanked at the device, but the expanded metal caught, locked in place, tearing more with each attempt. "Oh God," she whispered, her mask of confidence shattered. The sheets beneath Lennox darkened as blood seeped from his body. His cries grew weaker, his chest rising and falling in frantic bursts. His eyes met hers, wide with terror, silently begging for help. Selena pulled again, desperate, but the device refused to yield. Panic overtook her. She backed away from the bed, her breaths rapid, her hands shaking violently. Lennox tried to call her name, but his voice broke into a wet cough, red spilling from his lips. His body convulsed, and he collapsed against the mattress, still tethered to the cruel metal that had betrayed both of them. Above deck, the party roared on, fireworks booming in the sky, masking the horror unfolding below. Selena pressed both hands against her face, pacing the small cabin. She muttered to herself, whispering curses and half-formed prayers. Every glance toward Lennox's body made her stomach twist, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the blood pooling beneath him. She darted to the door, cracked it open, then slammed it shut again. The music was still loud, the guests oblivious. If she called for help, questions would follow, police would come, and her involvement would be impossible to explain. She gripped the edge of the dresser, her knuckles white, her mind racing. Lennox moaned, a weak, gurgling sound that cut through her panic. She turned back to him, her breath catching at the sight of his trembling hands reaching toward her. For a split second, guilt softened her expression, but fear smothered it quickly. She stepped closer, trying once more to twist the regulator, but it was broken beyond repair. Lennox's cry of agony rang out, raw and pitiful. She dropped the device, stumbled backward, and pressed herself against the wall. The sound of her own heartbeat pounded louder than the music above. She knew he was dying. Every second his skin grew paler, his breath shorter, the life draining from his body. Selena's thoughts tangled between escape and responsibility. She whispered, "I didn't mean this. I didn't mean it," but the words felt hollow. Lennox's eyes fluttered, still searching for her, desperate, clinging to her presence as the only tether left. She sank to her knees beside the bed, tears stinging her eyes, her hand hovering above his but never daring to touch. For a brief, fleeting moment, she considered screaming for help, facing whatever consequences followed. But then her gaze fell on the black bag in the corner, the devices, the evidence. Fear hardened her. She stood abruptly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Lennox let out a final, choked gasp, his body shuddering violently before going limp. Selena stood frozen, staring at the stillness, at the ruin of a man who only wanted to feel alive again. The fireworks ended above, replaced by cheers and applause from the deck. The contrast was unbearable. Selena grabbed the black bag, stuffed the remaining items inside, and crept toward the door. She hesitated, one last look at the lifeless form on the bed, then slipped out into the corridor, the noise of the party washing over her like a disguise. The morning sun stretched across the bay as Damien Cole returned to the lower deck of his yacht, his head heavy from too many drinks. The music had ended hours ago. Most guests had passed out in cabins or been ferried ashore by the tender. He yawned, rubbing his temples, when he noticed a faint metallic smell in the corridor. Something about it pulled at his senses, sharp and wrong. He followed it to the guest cabin door, left slightly ajar. "Hello?" he called, pushing it open. The sight inside froze him. Lennox Grant lay sprawled on the bed, his body bloodied, the sheets soaked deep crimson. His abdomen was grotesquely distended, and the glint of twisted metal protruded where no human body could endure. Damien's scream echoed through the cabin, waking those still aboard. Within minutes, chaos erupted, guests stumbling in, gasping, covering their mouths, some rushing back up the stairs in horror. Nia Roberts collapsed against the wall, her face pale beneath the smudged remnants of last night's makeup. Jamal Price swore loudly, pacing, muttering that he had known something bad was bound to happen on a night like this. The Coast Guard was summoned, their sirens slicing through the calm morning. Police followed, boarding the yacht with grim efficiency. Officers cordoned off the vessel, herding shocked guests into the main salon where silence hung like a weight. Detective Frank Doyle, tall with graying hair and a lined face hardened by years of experience, introduced himself briskly. With him was Detective Carla Monroe, sharp-eyed and deliberate, her notebook already in hand. They moved quickly to the cabin where Dr. Harris Levine, the medical examiner, crouched over Lennox's lifeless body. "Male, approximately 50, Levine muttered, his gloved hands stained with crimson as he examined the injuries. "Cause of death appears to be catastrophic internal trauma. Massive tearing of abdominal and genital tissue. Unusual injuries. I've never seen anything quite like it." Doyle squinted at the twisted metal device now sealed in a clear evidence bag. "What the hell is this thing?" Levine shook his head. "Some kind of modified apparatus. A sex device, possibly. But it looks like the mechanism malfunctioned, expanded far beyond safe limits." Monroe leaned in, her brow furrowed. Or maybe it wasn't designed to be safe at all. Back in the salon, the detectives began their questioning. Guests shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Damien spoke first, his voice low. "I found him like that. I didn't touch anything, I swear." Doyle nodded, but pressed on. "Who was he here with?" Nia lifted a trembling hand. "He came with Selena. Selena Becky. She introduced him to us. They disappeared together sometime after the fireworks." Doyle's gaze sharpened. "Where is she now?" Silence followed. Tyrone Ellis, still groggy, muttered that he hadn't seen her since the party wound down. Maya Jefferson added softly, "She was with him when they went below deck. She never came back up." Monroe's pen scratched across her notepad. "So she leaves with him, he ends up mutilated, and she vanishes before morning." Jamal slammed his fist against the armrest. "I told y'all she was trouble. Always bringing some wild energy around. This ain't no accident." The detectives exchanged a glance, the same conclusion forming between them. Selena was missing, Lennox was dead, and whatever had been used on him was not something anyone should have had in their hands. Doyle stood, his voice carrying authority. "Until we find her, no one leaves this yacht without giving us everything they know about her. Friends, addresses, connections, anything. A hush followed his words, broken only by the faint lapping of waves against the hull. Above deck, the marina bustled with routine life, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded during the night. Down below, fear and suspicion settled thick in the air, every guest suddenly wondering how much they really knew about Selina Mbeki and what secrets she had brought aboard the Sea Spirit. Detectives Doyle and Monroe left the yacht with grim faces, carrying with them the names, fragments of conversations, and descriptions that pointed toward one woman. Selina Mbeki had vanished into the night, but not without leaving a trail. Surveillance footage from the marina showed her slipping off the yacht just before dawn, her dress stained and her bag clutched tightly against her chest. From there, she disappeared into the city, but not before cameras caught her boarding a taxi. The driver later confirmed that she had been pale, shaken, and silent, staring out the window as if haunted by something she couldn't outrun. The detectives pushed harder, canvassing her neighborhood and speaking to acquaintances. Within days, her apartment was searched. Inside, officers found sketches of the strange metal devices, prototypes dismantled on her workbench, and notes written in hurried, obsessive scrawl about intensifying sensation and limits of the human body. There were receipts for parts purchased online, jars of lubricants, and even fragments of earlier designs, evidence that proved she had been experimenting for a long time. Every page, every tool, every scribbled idea tied her directly to Lennox's death. Selina was arrested in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, sitting alone with a suitcase by her side and a half-empty bottle of liquor on the nightstand. When questioned, she wept and insisted it had been an accident, that she had never meant for Lennox to die. She claimed the devices had worked before without issue, that this one must have been defective, a tragic miscalculation. Detective Doyle remained unmoved. "You left him bleeding to death," he reminded her coldly, his voice firm but heavy with disgust. "That's not an accident. That's abandonment." In the interrogation room, Selina's composure wavered, her tears falling freely, but she stuck to her claim that she panicked, that fear made her run, that she thought no one would believe her if she stayed. Detective Monroe leaned forward, her voice sharp and deliberate, pointing out that Selina had not only fled, but had hidden the bag of devices and tried to wipe down the surfaces in the cabin before escaping. Selina broke down further, admitting she had taken the bag but swore it was not to hide a crime, only because she feared what people would think if they saw what she had created. Neither detective accepted her explanation. The trial became a spectacle. The courtroom was packed from the very first day. Journalists scribbled notes, cameras clicked outside the courthouse, curious onlookers filled every available seat, and Lennox's family sat in the front row, their faces hollowed by grief. The prosecutor built a case brick by brick, painting Selina as reckless, irresponsible, and callous, a woman who had sought thrills and money without caring about the risks. They showed the jury photographs of Lennox before his death, a man of dignity, compared against the horrifying images taken in the cabin afterward. They replayed the testimony of Damian Cole, who discovered the body, and the statements of guests who confirmed Selina had vanished after being alone with Lennox. The defense countered that it was a tragic accident, that Selina had no intention of causing harm, that the device had malfunctioned in a way she could not have predicted. They called expert witnesses who explained how regulators could jam, how mechanisms could fail under pressure, and they insisted she had tested them safely before. When Selina took the stand, she cried openly, her voice shaking as she told the jury she had cared for Lennox, that she had wanted to make him feel alive again, that she had never intended for things to end in horror. She said she would live with the image of his dying eyes forever, that she ran not because she didn't care, but because she was terrified, ashamed, and lost. Her words drew tears from some in the gallery, but the prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. "If you cared," he thundered, "why did you leave him to bleed alone? Why didn't you scream for help? Why didn't you face what you had done?" Selina sobbed, unable to answer, her silence echoing louder than any denial. The judge listened carefully, her face solemn, weighing the balance of tragedy and responsibility. In the end, the verdict was clear. Selina Mbeki was found guilty of manslaughter and abandonment. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 8, the courtroom filled with gasps as the sentence was read aloud. Her sobs echoed through the chamber as officers clasped cold steel cuffs around her wrists and led her away. Reporters swarmed outside, shouting questions she could not answer. Inside the courthouse, Lennox's sister spoke softly to the press. "He just wanted to feel loved again," she said, her voice breaking. "Instead, he died terrified and alone. Nothing can make that right. We will never forget him, but we will always wonder why she didn't save him." Detectives Doyle and Monroe stood nearby, silent, their faces as hard as when the case began. Another life had been lost to recklessness, another family broken beyond repair, another reminder that desire without responsibility could turn deadly. The yacht's sea spirit eventually returned to the marina, polished and repainted. Its parties resumed months later, but for those who knew the story, its name would forever carry the shadow of that terrible night. And so, the story of Lennox Grant came to its bitter end. A man who only wanted companionship found himself seduced into a nightmare he could never escape. The woman who promised him excitement and intimacy instead delivered him agony and death, and for that she would spend years behind bars. His legacy became a cautionary tale, whispered in the city, remembered in news archives, and repeated by those who saw how dangerous trust in the wrong person could be. What do you think about this case? Was Selena a reckless woman who never cared for Lennox, or was she simply caught in a tragic accident that spun out of control? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more stories like this, and let us know where in the world you are watching from.